Let's sew the party dress. You guessed it, it's perfect for parties. Today I'm going to be sewing it up in this beautiful orange rusty stretch velvet that I got from Etsy, and I will of course include a link to that as well as to my shop where you can purchase this sewing pattern. Let's get started. Go ahead and print your PDF pattern or your copy shop pattern, both files are available, and cut out your pattern pieces. So the first step is to finish the hemline on both the top front and the under front. I'll be using a serger to finish the edge before I sew the hem. If you don't have a serger, you can definitely use a zigzag stitch, or if you're not worried about your fabric fraying, you can skip that step altogether before we hem this piece. Now that both edges of the top front and under front are finished, we can go ahead and hem those using a 5/8 seam allowance. When working with stretch fabrics, especially something like a stretch velvet, it's really important that you're using the right needle for your machine and that you take your time. It can be kind of tricky to work with sometimes. And I'm just using a straight stitch for this hem. I don't need to use a zigzag stitch because this part of the dress doesn't need to stretch to get on the body. And here's what that looks like all finished. If you need to give these hems a good pressing, this is the time to do it. Be very careful when ironing stretch velvet, it can burn. With the hem finished, we are now going to lay the top front on top of the under front, and using a 1/8 seam allowance, we're going to baste these two pieces together, and they will now be treated as one piece moving forward. And again, you're gonna really wanna take your time with this step. Stretch velvet can shift and slide while you're sewing it, so just move slowly and take your time. If you're not sure where to baste, you can reference your sewing pattern instructions. The illustrations will show you in a red dotted line on where to baste. Now it's time to take both cuts of your back pieces and sew them right sides together at the center seam. And after you finish that, you can go ahead and finish the edge. Today, you'll see that I'm simply using my serger to sew a lot of seams. Now we're gonna work on the hem of the back piece. Go ahead and finish the edge and then hem using the same 5/8 seam allowance. And now it's time to sew up the side seams. So this is a good point to pause and just check and make sure that everything is the same length. We have to hem these pieces before putting them together due to the nature of the curved hem on the inside. So take a quick peek, make sure everything's the same length because you'll want to make those adjustments before you dive into sewing up the side seams. And now that we know that everything is the right length with right sides together, go ahead and sew up your side seams. Again, I'm just going to use my serger today. And here you can see I made sure that my hems matched in length. Now it's time to work on the facing, which gives us a really clean neckline, which I love. So with right sides together, you're going to sew the side seams of front facing and back facing. And once that's done, it'll be referred to as simply the facing. With both side seams complete, go ahead and finish the bottom edge of the facing. It's much easier to do it now than when it's inside the dress. Now it's time to insert the top of the dress into the facing. So you're going to have the wrong side of the facing to the right side of the dress. I know that can be a little confusing. Make sure that your shoulder straps are matching and do not sew the top of the shoulder strap shut. You'll need that to turn the facing to the right side. And also be sure that you leave an opening for the part where the strap comes back around and tucks into the dress. You'll see here that I mark it with my pins. All right, now it's time to sew the facing to the dress, and being very careful that you don't sew shut the strap at the top or the opening for the strap to be inserted into. All right, things are gonna look a little crazy, but now it is time to turn the facing to the inside of the dress using that strap opening, giving you a very clean neckline. This is a great point to double check your work and make sure that you didn't miss any of those layers while you were sewing them together. Now, I find it easiest to do this next step from the inside of the dress. we're going to take the top of the shoulder strap and tuck it into the small opening that we left in the back. So once you have that all pinned in place, what you are going to do is you are going to close that opening from the inside of the dress. So that way it gives us a nice clean finish on the outside of the dress, and your strap is perfectly tucked into the back of your dress. You are so close to being done. There is only one step after this. Just take your time on this step. You are working with a lot of layers. Now we're going to use a technique called understitching, and it's where we're going to stitch the seam allowance to the facing inside of the dress, and this helps everything lay nice and really flat. So understitching is a great technique. Before you understitch, you can actually press that seam allowance to the facing, and be sure to tuck the shoulder piece out of the way. You don't want to accidentally stitch it while you're understitching. You're not going to be able to get all the way up into the neckline, into the part of the shoulder strap, but just go as far as you can, and trust me, this will help your neckline lay flat. And that's it. Take this dress off the machine, give it a good pressing, but be really careful because velvet will melt. And let's take a look in the mirror at our final product. And there you have it. I've now made this dress 3 times in 3 different colors. I'm a big fan of it, of course. I hope you love it as well. As always, please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.